when you're brought to your knees, you have two options. You either die or you climb out of it. And I just wasn't willing to die. And so by taking the steps of moving forward, I had to answer that question that I didn't want to answer because I knew it was going to be hard. And once I was able to answer it, then I was truly able to climb out. So I was just put in a situation where it was sink or swim, and I chose to swim.
All right. All Things Success podcast, episode number 7. We have Mikey Taylor. Mikey, how are you?
Doing well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great, man. We are just super stoked to have you on. We knew you were coming on the show. We just were so pumped because we relate to you so much, with me being in real estate and both of us growing up skating and now Justin transitioning into a career. We just really couldn't be happier to have you on.
Epic. Yeah, I'm stoked to be here too. Thanks, guys.
For sure.
Definitely, Mikey. So first off, I want to say congrats on the newborn. I saw that you literally 2 weeks old, is it?
2 weeks old yesterday.
Yeah, and your first boy, right?
First boy, yeah. Third kid, first boy. We did it.
We made it.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely to reiterate, appreciate you for being on here. It must you have a really busy time.
Yeah, no problem, guys. I'm stoked to be here.
It means a lot. So to start this off, I kind of want to talk about how we even got into this situation. I went out on a whim and texted you through your Instagram, you put up a number, and I honestly didn't think you would reply. I thought it was all fake, I was like, why not? So, it just really shows me the power of how social media works and how you can leverage it to, great things like this.
Yep, totally. And to tell you the truth, that's been kind of one of the coolest things about that text number is I think most people go in expecting me not to answer and it just to be bot marketing.
Exactly.
And so, I'll hit them back yo, what's up, dog? And they're like, wait, is this really you? Send me a pic. And then sending the pic, it's So that's been cool. The challenge though is it's getting so big that it's I'll block off time and try to get through, try to get to as many people as possible. But I'm delayed on my response now. People will send me texts and it might take me a day to get back to them. But I'm hoping that I can maintain this for as long as possible. We're actually talking.
That's the whole point, right? I mean, you want to get that recognition, and it's only natural that it's just going to get too much to handle at some point, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So why don't we go ahead and start this off? Mikey, why don't you start by telling us about your background, how you got your start in your careers and just where you're at now?
Okay, my background, I started off as a skateboarder. I just normal kid, saw somebody with a skateboard that I thought was cool, wanted to fit in, got a skateboard, and it kind of just took over. It was the first obsession of mine that lasted longer than 2 or 3 months. It actually went for 25 years. So it was really the beginning of my career was figuring out how to not have to stop skating. When I was starting to be pushed up by my parents to get a job. And then, when high school ended, I was pushed to go to college, and I looked at all of those things as meaning I was no longer allowed to skate, and I didn't want to do that. So I spent the next 15 years trying to hack my way out of that, and thankfully enough ended up turning it into a career. And then as I was skating, I had to kind of figure out what life was like after skating. And so that's when I kind of took a stab in trying to own my own brands and kind of the business side of skateboarding, and then what would end up continuing beyond skateboarding. And that's what I do now. Now I run a private equity fund. It's called Commune Capital. We invest in apartment buildings. So a little bit of a change, but that, basically my whole story is found something I loved, didn't want to go to school, figured out how to make money. The thing I loved eventually had to end, and I had to figure out how to put myself in a good position moving forward, really.
So during your skate career, were you always different, or you always had that different mindset than other skaters? Other people think about, I just want to skate every day, film, get clips. But did you always have it in your head, I want to be a business owner one day?
I didn't always have it in my head that I wanted to be a business owner. but I always had it in my head that skateboarding couldn't last forever. And that mixed with, I had an idea of what my life was going to look like. And, at the age that I was going through this, my parents and kind of society as a whole really pushed this kind of message of, if you don't go to college, you can't make money.
Yep.
And like, I had this idea of what my life was going to look like. Like, I wanted to be successful. I wanted to kind of live out this dream that I thought my life would look like. And so there was this feeling that I wasn't going to be able to achieve that if I didn't go to college. So I think that was always in the back of my mind, was like, okay, I'm not going to college. No one's going to give me a job. I'm not going to be able to make that money the normal way. So I need to figure out how I can do it. And there were a handful of skateboarders, Jamie Thomas being one of the biggest ones, that own their own companies. And so it was just my first kind of view that, skaters can own their own companies, and then skaters then have the ability to, like, if you own your own company, you can continue your career longer because it's the company that tells you how long you get to be sponsored for. So Jamie was the first one that I saw and went, oh my gosh, if I own the companies, then I don't ever have to stop being a pro skateboarder. I could just, take my career as long as I want. And then I started, as that started growing, I realized that wasn't actually the case, that there's such thing as demand. And, I can't just like force my way to have demand something that the people decide, not me. And so that ended up moving into that. But no, to answer your question simply, I didn't think I was going to go into business. I didn't think I liked business. I thought all I liked was skateboarding. And then I started seeing correlations between the two that I actually really enjoyed.
So you're talking about Jamie, and he did like the whole black box distributions. A lot of people, or a lot of the skaters, they're like, let me start a board brand, a distribution company. So, and then you were talking about demand as well. Did you think about like wanting to start your own distribution, or were you straight up like, all right, real estate is where it's at?
So when it came to Jamie, there was a video I saw where Jamie was filming. I think he was filming Adrian Lopez, right? And Jamie was the first person I saw and went, oh my gosh, like he does more than just skateboarding. And then I found out he owned Zero. And then he started falling. He kept starting all these things. So I think he was the person that opened my eyes that skateboarders can be more than skateboarders. I just didn't know what that meant in the beginning. And then as I actually got my first shoe, that's when stuff like demand and kind of the business working of skateboarding really took a hold of me, because shoes is where you make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I got my first shoe. I started getting like what I thought at the time, these huge checks. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I get more of this? And then, stuff like design and sales and marketing, I saw that had a larger correlation with how much product I was selling, as opposed to what I originally thought was, the better I am at a skateboarder, the more product I sell. And that actually wasn't true. So I was like, became infatuated, like, oh my gosh, I can sell more product regardless if someone else is better than me. Like there's so many more components that go into it. And that was like when it really started. And then from there, it went into actually craft beer before real estate.
Yeah. So, and to piggyback off that, your last answer from Justin too, and not having a degree, when you started getting more into Commune Capital, because I don't have a degree either. I did like a semester junior college, and I was like, I'm not doing this, right? So how did you ever struggle with kind of shedding that stigma in a sense of like, because you're surrounding yourself with so many high net worth individuals, right, in real estate, and then kind of just that, in the back of your mind thinking like, oh man, I don't have a college degree. I don't, you know what I mean? Do you relate to that at all?
Yes. I don't know if it was the college degree as much as it was the skateboarder. And the reason I say that is, skateboarders are perceived as one thing, right? And all of the sudden I'm sitting at a table with people that like you would never imagine skateboarders being involved with, right? So, I'm all of a sudden I'm experiencing myself sitting at a table with really, really bright people, really successful people. And I'm kind of going through this moment of like, how the hell did I get here? And then that led into, should I be here? And so my big adjustment was like, I had to learn how to be confident in the fact that I was different. And because I was different didn't mean I didn't deserve a seat here. It just meant I wasn't the same as you. And then that ended up becoming what I perceived as one of my strategic advantages, where, I'm sitting at a table with a lot of guys that do things one way, and they were taught to do things one way, and they had experience doing things one way. And skateboarding, kind of the blessing of it is it teaches you how to look outside of the box.
Just to piggyback off that too, with me being in real estate, and kind of just wondering if you relate to the stigma as well of like professional attire in real estate, and what you've kind of, because I'm like a young guy with tattoos, and I just, suits is not, what I love to wear and stuff like that. But there is that older demographic, right, that you still have to work with, and they're just kind of in a different mindset than you. So I just want to know what your thoughts are on that as well.
Yeah. So, like from skating, we went to Saint Archer, which is a craft brewery. And, it was still kind of inside of our world in a sense, where we could show up like this, and, no one really gave a shit.
Yeah.
In real estate though, like private equity, like, dude, it's these dudes are in suits, So, yes, dude, I was like before, like even stepped into it, I was like, do I need to like change who I am? Do I like really need to like dress up? And, what I found was, when I initially walk into meetings, it kind of throws everybody off, right? Like, who is this guy? Is he like the intern? Is he taking notes? And then when they find out who I am involved in the company, it's like, you see this, like, I don't get it. But then as, it almost sets itself up perfectly because, everyone asks this question, what's up with you? Like, well, what's your deal? And as you go, well, dude, this is who I am, and this is the company I started, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden they're like, whoa, this is crazy. And then you stand out beyond anyone else. So it actually ended up being something that works in my favor, because every meeting I have, they never forget me. And then I become this like, dude, that's so crazy. Like, I met this guy, and it actually works out. But no, it was scary in the beginning for sure.
Of course. I think that's awesome, because you have to stay true to your brand, and that's who you are, right? And it's you coming up in a suit, right? And you might not be as confident, or you're just as much yourself,
Yeah. The hard part, I will say this, there is a balance though, because I'm able to leverage what I've done to allow myself, when they ask the question, to kind of back it up, right? Yeah. If I wouldn't have had that, is there this idea that I might have to kind of play the game before I can change it? Possibly. Because, part of that world as well is like, dude, a lot of those guys had to do a lot to get there. And there is such a standard way to do it that, if you kind of don't follow the rules, it throws them off, unless you took like just a whole different route to get there. And so, be mindful of that like, you don't want to miss your opportunity to even get in the door because you're dressed down. I'm already in the door, so I do have maybe a different scenario than most. But with that said, I think it's always important to stick true to yourself. Don't try to be somebody else, but be mindful of your surroundings if that doesn't contradict itself too much.
Right.
So I definitely feel it, Mikey, because like, I'm even younger than Roland. I'm 20, and I feel like I need to dress, to a certain standard and hold my professional brand to, a really high level, because, I'm so young and people are looking at me like, who's this kid,
Yeah. And also too, like you got to know who you're speaking with, right? Like if I didn't know you guys and you guys set up a meeting with me, I don't care how you look. I'm more focused on what you do.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of more of the younger generation. As far as like the generation above me, they're still kind of in that you need to dress respectively, and I need to know that you're serious and blah blah blah. So I guess it's important to be mindful of who you're around.
Totally. Definitely. So transitioning that question to the skater perspective, right? Coming up as a skater and then transitioning into business and real estate, did you ever get that judgment in a sense from fellow skaters because you were thinking bigger? And, I'm sure there was so many support that were like super supportive, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like there could be some closed-mindedness or when you're taking on a new venture like that.
Yes, of course. I think there's two elements to it. There's one, my my friends and peers in the industry. And then there's also, you know, the skaters that followed me. So I caught it on both ends. It was like, you know, from an industry standpoint, it was like, I don't, you know, what the hell are you talking about? I had one of my friends, right? Huge pro skateboarder. And he started seeing kind of my content, and I ran into him and he was like, hey dude, I have no clue what you're doing. I don't even understand what you're saying, but it looks like you're having fun. So like, you know, there was that aspect of it, but I think, you know, there is this backlash that like, I shouldn't be doing this because I was a pro skateboarder. And, you know, even from like a content standpoint, like, dude, I'll still to this day, 3 years later, get messages, just go back to skating. We just want to see you skate. Why are you talking about this stuff? And even from the point of like losing followers over it, like, dude, I lose followers every single post I do that is not skateboarding still 3 years later, you know? So like there is but on the other end, it's what I signed up for. It's right. It's like, I built a following being one thing, and a lot of people followed me for that specifically. And so having it change, I mean, dude, it's like you following a rapper, and then all of a sudden that rapper goes into like country, like, you know, there's going to be some drop off, you know? So that's kind of just expected. But what has been probably the best thing about this is the amount of skateboarders that went, hey dude, like when you started talking about this stuff, I wasn't interested at all. I was like, really, like, why are you doing this? And then as I started paying attention, like, I'm so thankful for what you're saying, because I never would have gotten this information otherwise. So, you know, that is like what I'm hanging on to. But, oh yeah, I mean, dude, backlash for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I could totally like see that, because, you know, when you're doing the Omni intelligence, like those, like with Eric Bork, I was like, you know, I wasn't really in that space, but then I like started watching and I was like, wow, like this is some like real stuff.
Hey, too, remember, like, people are like, when I was skating, I didn't talk about any of this stuff. Even like when we started Saint Archer, like Paul and I didn't really talk about Saint Archer much, other than, you know, it was like marketing the message, but we didn't talk about it from a business standpoint of starting the company. So, you know, I think there was a point where people were like, why is he even talking about this stuff? Like, what does he know about this? And, you know, that was, I think, not only my bad, but part of my insecurity. Is like, skaters don't talk about being successful. Skaters don't talk about doing business. Like, that's kind of frowned upon in skating. And so I was so worried about what people would think of me while I was still a skateboarder. And then as it ended, it was like, well, what do I have to lose now? It's like, you know, I might as well just be myself. But there definitely is that, like, you're a skater. Like, why are you talking about money? You're a skater, you know? But
so thinking about your skating career, do you think if you never tore your ligament, you may have only stuck to skating and never like gone down that other path of ventures like Commune Capital and Omni Intelligence and stuff like that?
No, I still would have gone down that path, but it would have been a greater struggle for me. You know, there was a blessing in a sense of getting hurt and then losing my sponsor and then being forced to make a decision where, you know, I think most athletes feel this, but it's like, if you're still able to do it, even if it's like past your prime, it's so hard to fully step away. Yeah. And, you know, I know I would have got to a point where I would have just I would have forced it, but it would have been difficult for me for sure. I mean, dude, it's like, it's what I love. It's like I spent 25 years of my life every single day doing this. Right. And like, that's hard to walk away from, you know, especially like, dude, I love it. It's like, it's not easy. And so for me, like, it definitely pushed me to go, well, that's not even an option anymore. Like, I have to figure this out, where maybe now I'd still be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I mean, you guys know how that goes. It's like, when you're half into things, you just don't succeed at them. So I think that ended up becoming a blessing for me to be kicked out instead of make my own time to leave, you know?
Exactly. And so everything's always like a blessing in disguise. And I really believe that. So
yeah, I do too.
Even though Justin and I know why you went the route of multifamily investing and syndication, if you could tell the listeners why you went that route and what you're able to do for others with that vehicle.
Yeah. So basically what I didn't tell you is when I told my parents that I was going to be a pro skateboarder and not go to college, they pretty much panicked. And my dad kind of came up with this ultimatum. He was like, hey, look, we have this friend, Randy. He manages our money. If you can convince him to help you, then okay, you'll have our blessing. And so Randy, you know, I meet Randy when I'm 19. I tell him what I'm up to, convince him to help me. Well, he didn't not only help me, he actually like fully mentored me and kind of big broed me, and really taught me about money, taught me about kind of the foundations of really behavioral finance at that point, and then taught me about, you know, investments that ultimately can put myself in a position of some type of financial freedom. And so during that journey with him, his company always had an alternative investment portfolio. So they had a storage unit fund, they had a lending fund. And so those were a lot of the first opportunities I was investing in, was commercial real estate. And as I started experiencing what passive income really meant, I completely became addicted to it. It was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. But the challenge I had was I was a pro skateboarder. Like I wasn't a pro football player. We weren't making millions. So I had to really, I think one of the key points of my success that he really drilled into me was almost like this reverse Dave Ramsey approach. Are you guys familiar with Dave Ramsey?
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Dave Ramsey helps people get out of debt.
Yeah.
And so he has this like debt snowball, but more than anything, he's showing you how to live off less than you make so that you can put money towards paying down debt, right? Removing the emotion to money. Well, I had to go through that same thing because I didn't make enough money to really participate in these deals like I needed to. So for the first 10 years, I was on this Ramsey schedule. It was like I was living off a fraction of what I was making. I was living like I was poor. And so I was able to put more money into opportunities. And when I started seeing them work, it was like so much encouragement to just like stay on track. Okay, I'm making good money now. I'm still going to be broke because this passive income's too good.
Yeah.
And so I experienced that. And then even with Saint Archer, we ended up selling it 2015. And it was like big windfall of cash, right? But what I was taught is a big bundle of cash doesn't do anything for me, right? I need to figure out how to get it to work. And so, dude, it was just a bigger, it was just more firepower to put towards real estate. And so when my career officially ended, really what happened was I didn't need to work anymore. And that is not normal for skaters. It was like me and like two other guys that were in this scenario, and two of them were reality stars. So I was like, you know, it was like such a rad feeling, but it was kind of shitty at the same time because I don't want to be the only one over here. Like, these are my friends and family. Like, I want them to like do great things in skateboarding and then continue instead of being put in a situation where they need to kind of fight for survival. And so as I was going down this, like, how can I help them? I wanted to originally do everything that Randy did for myself. I wanted to do for my friends. And so there was a component of it where I needed to educate the same way Randy educated me. And then as far as the opportunities I was participating in, commercial real estate, it was specific to storage and multifamily. Yeah. And so those are the assets that I always felt comfortable in. And so when I started it, I wanted those to be the big driving assets behind our company. And so that's kind of why I led towards it. And then what had happened with multifamily was, you know, my generation had a totally different view of housing as opposed to the generation before us, mainly due to what happened in 2008, 2009. And then with this technology boom, it became more about freedom to move around instead of having to be locked down in one place for 15 to 30 years. And so I really started liking multifamily more and more. And that's why now, you know, our efforts have changed from being really, really heavy in storage, or we still are heavy in storage, but we spend a lot of time in multifamily as well.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love that because I'm, you know, searching for my first multifamily property right now. And it's just so awesome to see what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and I know I didn't really answer your question. You kind of asked why I like multifamily so much.
Yeah.
Is that what you asked?
But yeah.
So I think it's with people think, and I felt the same way, but people think like when you invest, it should be like Vegas. It's like I put a little bit of money in and then I get a huge amount of money back, right? And then it's also met with you're not allowed to start investing until you're like fully rich. And what I learned was, one, those areas where you can potentially double or triple or quadruple your money, there's such a small percentage of that actually happening, and the greater percentage lies in you losing all your money. And I didn't like that risk. So I started learning the difference between risk and reward. And when it all kind of, when I looked at all the opportunities I had, what I liked about some asset classes in commercial real estate, like multifamily, I felt like I was taking the smallest amount of risk for what was perceived as the greatest reward compared to the risk I was willing to take. And so I really like that element to it, that you can pretty much, if done right, really rely on money coming in. Because remember, that was like my whole path. It's like, if I don't have a job and money's not coming in, I need to rely on the interest that my investments are making. And so I don't want that interest to go away. So that was just one area that I've always felt really confident in, because my experience with it has always been great. The money always comes in. Now you could do it wrong and that doesn't happen.
Exactly.
But from my experience, it's been really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. It's like, you could tell how like passionate you are about like multifamily and all that stuff just in your voice.
Yeah, I like it. But there's other elements I like to it as well, where like storage, for example. Storage is just a great investment. It's an awesome investment. But I don't have the same passion I do as apartments, because there's not a lot of community aspect to it. There's not really a lot of design aspect. There's elements to an apartment that I think lend itself to somebody like me who comes from a creative world, where it feels like there's more you can do beyond the actual investment.
Exactly.
Definitely. So,
and you always need a place to live. That's
exactly.
a big one.
Yeah,
everybody needs a place to live.
Yeah. Same. So not to get us, too off track, but I want to kind of touch about like marketing and social media for you. You've never been like camera shy besides all your video parts, but like just like Mikey Days, the best theme song ever. And just all the stuff you did on the barracks, like just hosting and all that. And then up until now, 2020, you're kind of seen as this like super influencer, like motivational guy. How do you feel like you leverage social media to your advantage in this day and age?
Such a good question. There's one way in which I use it. There's another way in which I leverage it. And so, from like how I was doing it with skateboarding, it was actually my wife, believe it or not, takes full credit for this. My wife was the one that told me. She was like, hey, look, people can only connect with the trick you're doing. It can only go so far, right? But not everybody can do a kickflip front crook. But what they do connect with is like the reality or the person that you are, like showing them the struggle you go through or the highs and the lows. Like everyone can relate to that regardless if they can do the trick. And so that was like the first time I started realizing like, oh my gosh, like if I open up and allow people to have insight on kind of what my life really looks like and how I go about tricks, the good and the bad, right? The stuff I don't want you to see. Well, that's when people actually connect with you. And then what that does as far as being able to reach people, being able to sell product, being able to actually have a community, it just takes you way further. So once I grabbed onto that, it was like, okay, I need to start becoming comfortable with my insecurities because I'm going to start showing them. And then what that led to was a big following that was beyond my talent on a skateboard, right? And I think that was the big shocker for me is I had more followers than people that were way better than me. I had no business having that many more followers than them as far as like how I originally perceived skateboarding. So there was that. And then now, as far as my social media goes, I just got to a point where I wanted to add some type of value in it. Like if somebody followed me, I wanted them to like be given something instead of just, this is me and this is what I do and follow me because I'm cool. And so I had that switch in my actual content. As far as leveraging it, I leverage it in a lot of ways inside of real estate. It's like, when we meet with investors or we meet with brokers or anyone that we need to kind of potentially do business with, dude, of course I'm going to say, yeah, so dude, we're really heavy on social media. And I actually was a pro skateboarder and that led into this and you should follow us. And dude, by nature, man, like we aren't great at this, but if you have a lot of followers, you're just naturally drawn to it. So you see people go, holy shit, you have 800,000. This is psycho. Like, yeah. And then, it puts you in a different category than others. So I that would be a way where I do leverage it. And also Commune. Like, I've leveraged my social media to bring exposure to Commune. And it's given me the ability to start brands based on my current following. Same with Saint Archer. We use our social media to build that brand.
Exactly. So I was reading a blog about you, and the only reason I bring this up again is because it was so relatable. When you had your first kid, you were kind of touching on it was a super scary thing. And in your mind, you're like, holy shit, I got to provide for this life. And I'm still figuring out my own life. And does it really drive you to do that much better? Right. I mean, I've always had the fear of taking the next step of having children. And, there's so much that I want to do for myself and my fiance. And I, in the blog, you were kind of talking about how skateboarding is a selfish sport, and, it was selfish thinking. So I just want to get your process and your thought process on that.
I think for those who are parents and for those who are going to become parents, right? We originally have this idea that like, we've got our shit figured out, because usually we don't get married or we don't have kids until we feel like we're at a certain place to manage it, right? And then you have your first child and you're like, oh my gosh, I have no clue what I'm doing. My life is actually not as controlled as I thought. And I'm pretty damn selfish, right? I think that was the biggest realization for me. It was like, all I do is think about myself. And now I have a child that's forcing me to think about somebody else, yet I'm still trying to like naturally pull away and do my own thing. So there was a realization, that I'm incredibly selfish and I need to really work on being more selfless. There was another element to it that you kind of touched on it. You were like, dude, did you become more motivated to like succeed and support your family? And that was the original feeling I had, where it was like, okay, it's on me to like, keep us locked down and, financially like have money coming in and be there to support us. But I will say there's been an element to it that I've learned that as much control as I really want, I truly don't have. Mm-hmm. And I think there was actually, believe it or not, comfort in that, where, I always put these milestones on like things I had to achieve before I did things. And then the realization of like, that was all in my head. Like, I thought like I had to make this much money, so then I could have kids. And then to realize I could have half of that and none of that. And the things that are actually important that I need to instill in my child have nothing to do with the income I'm making. So it was like that mixed with like, dude, what if things happen and you go through this whole, what if I lose my job and I can't support? You slowly realize that like, what, all of that stuff can happen. And there's nothing I can really do to not, what would you say? There's nothing I could do to cause that to not happen.
Yeah.
And so there was freedom in that. It was like, okay, like I'm going to do my best, but at the end of the day, like I don't have control to like stop these things from happening. I just have control on like working through them,
It's like analysis of paralysis, but with having kids.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Nice. So we talked a lot about like Commune, like Capital, and like, for our listeners, could you just give us like a gist of Commune Capital, how it works for everyone, and like all your partners, like how many partners you have in it?
Yeah. So we have 4 partners. The original person, Randy, that my parents told me I had to convince to help me with my money, is actually one of my partners in the company, which is really cool.
That's awesome.
We, really at the end of the day, the belief system is, well, let me take a step back. This will explain it better. I always thought that I had to have a certain amount of money before I got to participate in something like commercial real estate, right? Like, oh my gosh, I need $400,000 to put down to be able to afford this, 6-unit apartment. And when I met Randy, I realized that that was the wrong way to think of it. Actually, all of us could come together and buy these apartments that single-handedly I can't participate in, but as a whole, we all can collectively do together. And so it was like that idea mixed with how skateboarding is, and skateboarding is very community-based. Like, when we would all go out and skate, I would be with like 5 or 6 other pros, and we would all be trying to do tricks, but we weren't trying to one-up one another. we were all trying to do the best trick that we could possibly do and encourage everyone else around us that they could do it as well. And it was like, I just came from this, like, us together, we strengthen numbers, and really wanted to push that in an investment group. So it's really, at the end of the day, a community of investors that believe that we are stronger together.
I love that answer. That's awesome. And it's really cool that you related it back to skateboarding too.
I mean, it was funny, man. It's like, look, I skated for 25 years. I was pro for 15. It's like, at this point, I was birthed in the skateboarding world. Yeah. So it's like, dude, a lot of the lessons I've learned just happen to come from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are some of your mentors that helped you with the transition into business and real estate? Obviously, you've already talked about the family friend growing up, but even some of your mentors, you know, just growing up and with the transition into pro skating.
So from a mentor standpoint, I had mentors. Well, I shouldn't say it like that. There were people that I looked up to in skateboarding that I tried to emulate. Mm-hmm. But as far as like having mentors, I never had a ton of them, to be truthful with you. Like Randy was a big one because, you know, he had so much knowledge in a world that I didn't understand. And so it was probably him that had the greatest impact on me as far as mentoring me through my transition. As far as skateboarding, like the thing that's interesting for us is like skateboarding, you figured out yourself, right? There's no like playbook on how to do it. So like when you want to learn a trick, it's you learning it. And so as I was skateboarding, especially like, you know, making my way through the industry, I always just took this mentality of like, I have to figure out and I'm going to do it, but I'm going to take things that people were doing and try to figure out how to kind of put that into my life. And so then the idea of mentors or having people around me to like help me in areas actually didn't come till later. It was like once I started moving into the business world and had to make the adjustment that like with skating, it's all about me and I do things my way. And with business, it's all about team sport and surrounding yourself with people that are better than you in areas that you're not. That's when I really had to start learning the power of people. And so the majority of my mentorship came after, actually.
Mm-hmm. And then going back to Commune Capital just a little bit, what's the long-term vision for Commune Capital? Obviously you want to acquire, you know, as much as you can, right? And help as many people as you can. Would you guys ever do anything like a course or anything like that? What's your thoughts on that type of stuff?
You just brought something up that we talk about all the time.
Oh, really?
So there's two, I would say, goals for us. There's the business goal, and then there's the purpose goal. And they do go hand in hand, but I do like separating them because, you know, at the end of the day, my purpose is to have as many people as possible, not only equipped, but participating in the opportunities for them to achieve financial freedom, right? So that's why a big part of what we do is education-based. It's like all of our content is meant to put people in a position to participate, but we don't sell it. So there's none of our business is based around that, but that is part of our purpose. As far as the business goes, you know, I want as much people as possible to achieve financial freedom through investing with us. So, you know, will we get to a point where we create courses that people can pay for? Most likely. It's just not our main business. And the reason I bring that up is I feel like if you're doing something, you need to build it to a point of it being stabilized. Mm-hmm. And then you have the opportunity to bring on the next component of your business. But myself included, entrepreneurs, I feel like we just want to do everything. And we're so opportunistic we're so optimistic that like, we think we could do everything as well. And I think that actually can be very detrimental for us because when you do too many things at once, you open yourself up to fail in a lot of different areas. So with the course side, I think I have a little bit of time. There's still so much that we're working on our core business that, you know, maybe in a couple of years that could be a possibility. But for right now, it's just content, help people, and then come partner with us.
Exactly.
All right, Mikey. So we always like to ask our guests this last question. If you could tell young Mikey one piece of advice that you know now, what would you tell him?
Huh. The one, sorry, my daughter was knocking on the door. The one piece of advice that I would give the younger me, I would probably have told myself two things, actually, because there's two things that I majorly struggled with. One being, my personality, I find love and value in myself based on how other people treat me. So when people are praising me for something I'm doing great, I feel better about myself. When people aren't praising me, I feel insecure and just a lack of confidence, really. And so I didn't realize that at a young age, and that was doing so much, even in my joy through the rest of my life, that I was giving too many people power upon how I felt. So I would have said, you need to learn how to value yourself and how to love yourself, and don't let other people tell you how you should be, think, act, etc. The second thing I would have told myself is the importance of finding your true purpose. And I just didn't spend a lot of time thinking that deep on it, really specifically to the questions of, why am I here? What is the point of me being on this planet? And without knowing why you were made, it's impossible to find out if you're doing the thing you're supposed to be doing well. And so I probably would have pushed myself to go, you need to answer this question before you step out and try to be anything beyond it, would be the two things. And then how that would have changed my life was, instead of spending 15 years trying to be loved, I would have already been loved and no longer had to rely on other people. And two, when my skateboarding career ended, I don't think I would have gone through this moment of being lost and broken and not knowing who I was. I think it would have been much smoother for me to transfer into the next thing.
Just out of my own curiosity, because a lot of people don't even get the opportunity to think as deep as you just went into it, right? How did you come up with that? Did you ever do any therapy, or did you ever, because that's a pretty deep revelation to come up with on your own, if that makes sense.
So I came up with it because when my skateboard career ended, and we didn't really talk about this, prior to my skateboarding career ending, I was confident and happy, and if you saw me, you knew what you were going to get. And when my career ended, it was dark. Is all I can explain. I went through a moment where I was just telling myself, you need to get back to you. You need to find Mikey again, because I was completely lost. And it was one of those moments where, when you're brought to your knees, you have two options. You either die or you climb out of it. And I just wasn't willing to die. And so by taking the steps of moving forward, I had to answer that question that I didn't want to answer because I knew it was going to be hard. And once I was able to answer it, then I was truly able to climb out. So I was just put in a situation where it was sink or swim, and I chose to swim. If I wouldn't have chose to swim, I would have had to get some deep professional help.
Yeah.
But I think I've always had one thing that God gave me was, it's never been hard for me to talk about things I'm doing wrong. I don't know why. I've always been able to be very vocal about it. And so I think that, call it talent, allowed myself to just go, okay, this is wrong. I don't feel good. What am I missing? Where is the problem? And then, talking with my wife about it. What am I doing? What is going on? And I was just able to work through it, thankfully. But as far as getting help, I'm a big believer in getting help, because for our marriage, dude, we have a really good, healthy marriage, and we spend a lot of time with counselors and therapy. So There is a huge benefit. Just thankfully on my end, on that specific side of purpose, I was able to find it.
Yeah. And I love people being able to be open about that. Cause same with me and my fiance, we've had our fair share of therapy, and it's helped tremendously. I couldn't even tell you how much it's helped, but I think it's something that definitely needs to be opened up and talked about more, because always, growing up, it's like hush hush if someone's in therapy, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we do a bad job giving people credit when something's wrong. right? Like when something's wrong, we all try to like put it under the mat so that nobody knows that we're struggling, but it's natural for us to struggle. It's natural for things to go wrong. It becomes a challenge when you're trying to hide it, right? Because our whole goal should always be finding a solution to the problem. And if we're not willing to say there's a problem, you can never find the solution. And now we're all screwed. So, you know, I think we all need to get better at that. Just saying, hey, dude, it's like, I'm not good at this. I don't know. I messed up. But look, I'm now making steps on becoming better, you know?
Exactly. Mikey, this was awesome, man. We can't thank you enough again for taking this time. And, you know, maybe in the future, we would love to definitely have you back on. And just big thank you to you again.
Of course. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, everybody, and thanks so much for listening to this episode. It was so much fun to chat with Mikey. If you want to stay connected with us, follow our Instagram at All Things Success Podcast. We're dropping new episodes every Sunday on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. So be on the lookout for that. Until then, have a good one.